My wife texted from Vegas. Just married my coworker. You're pathetic, by the way, I replied. Cool. The phone screen went dark, reflecting the cracked plaster of the ceiling above my bed. I placed the device face down on the nightstand with a deliberate slowness, as if it were a disarmed bomb. The room was silent, save for the distant, perpetual hum of the city, a sound that had become the white noise of my failure. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just lay there, staring at the water stain in the corner that looked vaguely like a map of a country I'd never visit. Cool. The word hung in the air, a monument to my own absurdity. What else was there to say? Arguing? Pleading? Reminding her of the vows we took 5 years ago in a sun-drenched park, vows that felt as substantial as the dust motes dancing in the slanted morning light of this very room? That man, the one who believed in forever, felt like a character from a book I'd read long ago. Her name was Chloe. She had hair the color of autumn leaves and a laugh that could cut through the grimmest of my moods. I fell for her in college, when I was a scrawny physics major with big ideas, and she was an art history student who saw the world in shades of emotion I could only calculate. We were a cliché, the pragmatic scientist and the free-spirited artist, but for a long time, it worked. We balanced each other. I grounded her flights of fancy. She taught me how to feel the rain on my skin instead of just measuring its pH. The beginning of the end wasn't a dramatic fight or a discovered secret. It was a slow, insidious erosion, like rust on a neglected bridge. It started when I dropped out of my PhD program. My father got sick. The medical bills piled up, and my graduate stipend was a joke. I took the first job I could find, a data entry position at a logistics company. It was soul-crushing, but it paid the rent on our modest one-bedroom apartment. Chloe was supportive, at first. It's just for now, Leo, she'd say, kissing my forehead as I trudged in after 10-hour days. You'll get back to your research. This is temporary. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent. A year turned into 2, then 3. My passion for theoretical physics, for unraveling the secrets of the universe, was packed away in a mental box, gathering as much dust as my textbooks. The sparkle in my eyes, the one Chloe said she fell in love with, was replaced by the dull sheen of exhaustion. I was treading water, and she was starting to drown with me. The arguments began over small things. A forgotten anniversary. I'd picked up a double shift. A leaky faucet I hadn't fixed. The landlord was useless, and I didn't have the tools or energy. The fact that we hadn't been on a real vacation in years. Underneath it all was the unspoken truth. Money, or the lack of it. Chloe started working at a sleek marketing firm. Her world became one of client lunches, gallery openings, and colleagues who wore their success like a second skin. Her coworker, Mark, entered the picture around this time. He was everything I wasn't, effortlessly wealthy from a family trust fund, charismatic in a slick corporate way, and he drove a car that probably cost more than our lifetime earnings. I noticed the change. She'd come home buzzing with stories about Mark's brilliant campaign ideas, his new penthouse, his ski trip to Aspen. Her compliments for him were subtle digs at me. Mark actually listens when I talk about my ideas, she'd say, after I'd zoned out during a story about her day. Or, it's so refreshing to be around someone who does things, you know, who lives life. I tried. God, I tried. I took on freelance coding gigs late into the night, my eyes burning from the screen, trying to scrape together enough for a down payment on a house, for a future that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. But for every step I took, Mark's shadow loomed larger, offering a pre-built future, a life without struggle. The night before the Vegas conference, she packed a suitcase with clothes too elegant for any business meeting I'd ever heard of. It's a team-building thing, she said, not meeting my eyes. Lots of networking. Right, I said, my voice flat. I knew. I think we both knew. I knew. But saying it out loud would make it real, and I was too tired, too defeated, to fight a battle I'd already lost. So, when the text came, it was less a shock and more a final, brutal confirmation. The guillotine blade dropping after a long walk to the scaffold. You're pathetic, by the way. Those 3 letters were the cruelest part. An afterthought. A casual dismissal. The final verdict on Leo Evans. I got out of bed. The floor was cold. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The man staring back was 30, but looked older, pale from lack of sun, with dark circles under his eyes, and a posture that screamed surrender. Pathetic. Cool, I said to my reflection, and in that moment, something broke. Or perhaps something finally snapped into place. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy. This was cold, crystalline. It was a clarity I hadn't felt since I was solving complex equations in a university library, the world fading away until only the elegant logic of the problem remained. Chloe had framed my failure in terms of wealth, but that was a symptom, not the cause. My failure was a failure of strategy. I had been playing a defensive game, reacting to life's blows, trying to minimize loss. I had approached my life with the same rigid linear thinking I used for data entry, when what was required was a paradigm shift. I needed to stop solving the problem of poverty and start solving the problem of Leo. The first step was intelligence. I needed to understand the battlefield. I logged on to our shared computer, a slow, wheezing machine, and began to dig. I accessed her email. Her password was still the name of her childhood dog, a testament to her sentimental side, which now felt like a lie. I found the trail. The conference was a sham. Flirtatious emails with Mark planning the trip for weeks, discussions about annulment laws in Nevada, a forwarded email from a realtor about a multi-million-dollar property. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life, brick by digital brick, while I was in the next room, trying to fix a garbage disposal. I didn't feel a thing. The cold clarity insulated me. This was data, valuable data. I copied everything, bank statements, credit card records, the emails. I saved them to an encrypted drive. Then, I wiped my activity. I was a ghost. The next morning, I called in sick to my data entry job. I didn't plan on going back. I went to the local library, a place I hadn't visited since my academic days. The smell of old paper and quiet industry was like a tonic. I found a carrel in a remote corner, and I started to plan. My initial idea was to go back into tech. I could code, but that was a crowded field. I'd be competing with thousands of hungry graduates. It was the slow, grinding path. I needed an edge, a unique angle. For days, I lived in the library. I read business books, biographies of self-made millionaires, economic forecasts, and industry analyses. I was looking for a pattern, an inefficiency in the market, a need that wasn't being met. My physics background had trained me to think in systems, to see underlying structures. The economy was just another complex system. One afternoon, I stumbled upon an article about the coming revolution in quantum computing. It was still theoretical, the domain of massive corporations and government labs, but it mentioned a tangential field, advanced materials simulation, using classical computers to model the properties of new alloys and compounds at an atomic level, a process crucial for everything from aerospace to battery technology. The software for this was clunky, incredibly expensive, and required specialized knowledge. A spark, faint but undeniable, flickered in my mind. My graduate thesis had been on computational material science. It was the one part of my academic past that wasn't purely theoretical. It had practical industrial applications. I had let it languish. This was it. This was the crack in the door. But I had no money, no resources, no credibility. I was a broke data entry clerk with an abandoned academic career. I couldn't just start a company. I needed a Trojan horse. I spent the next week refining the idea. I wouldn't build the software itself that required capital and a team I didn't have. Instead, I would build a bridge. I would create a platform that simplified the interface between existing powerful simulation engines and the engineers who needed to use them. A sleek, intuitive SaaS, software as a service, product that democratized a complex tool. I would start small, targeting small to mid-sized engineering firms that couldn't afford the six-figure licenses and dedicated experts required for the existing software. I wrote a business plan. It was exhaustive. Market analysis, financial projections, technical specifications. I wrote code for a basic prototype on the library computers. Using open-source tools, I worked 18 hours a day, fueled by cheap coffee and a cold, relentless fire. I slept on a friend's couch after our apartment lease ended. I'd packed my meager belongings into 2 duffel bags and left the key on the counter. I was a machine. The ghost of Chloe's text, pathetic, was the ghost in my machine, the driving algorithm. After 3 months, I had a working prototype and a 50-page business plan. But I needed money. I needed to sell the vision. I identified a list of 20 venture capital firms and angel investors who had a history of funding deep tech and B2B software. It was concise, confident, and highlighted the immense untapped market. I made no mention of my personal story. I was Dr. Leo Evans, a specialist in computational material science, presenting a unique market opportunity. 19 rejections came back. Polite, form letter rejections. The 20th email was from a man named Arthur Vance. The subject line was, "Intrigued. Can you demo tomorrow? 10 a.m. Vance Capital." My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. The cold clarity held. This was simply the next logical step in the sequence. I showed up at the sleek offices of Vance Capital wearing the only decent suit I owned, which I'd bought for a funeral 2 years prior. It was a little tight in the shoulders. Arthur Vance was a man in his 60s, with a sharp gaze and a reputation for being brutally direct. He didn't offer me coffee. "Show me," he said, gesturing to my laptop. I demoed the prototype. I spoke about lattice structures, density functional theory, and user onboarding in the same measured tone. I presented the data from my research. I was answering questions, not pleading for a chance. After 20 minutes, he held up a hand. "Stop." He leaned back in his leather chair. "The tech is solid. The idea has merit. But why you? Your resume shows you dropped out of a PhD program and have been doing data entry for the last 3 years. That doesn't inspire confidence." This was the moment. I could lie, obfuscate, or try to spin it. Instead, I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice even. "For 3 years, I was solving the wrong problem. I was trying to survive. Survival is a low-energy state. It breeds reactivity. I am now solving the right problem: how to build something valuable. My past is not a liability. It's a calibration. I have been in the trenches. I understand the inefficiency from the ground level. And I have a focus now that no fresh graduate could possibly possess." He studied me for a long, silent minute. A smile, thin and sharp, touched his lips. "A calibration. I like that." He stood up and extended his hand. "We'll offer you $250,000 for a 15% stake. Standard terms. Don't disappoint me, Leo." The number was both astronomical and minuscule. It was more money than I'd ever seen. And yet, for a tech startup, it was a shoestring budget. I shook his hand. "You have a deal." The next 2 years were a blur of manic intensity. I rented a tiny office space that doubled as my apartment. I hired 2 people. A brilliant, cynical Ukrainian programmer named Anya, whom I poached from a failing gaming startup, and a relentlessly optimistic business developer named Ben, who believed in my vision more than I did. We were a strange trinity, working 100-hour weeks, living on takeout pizza, and arguing over code and marketing copy. I never spoke of Chloe. My past life was a closed book. My motivation was an internal engine, humming with a cold, perpetual motion. We launched our platform Kratos, after the Greek god of strength, into a beta. The initial feedback was positive. We iterated, improved, and slowly, we started to get paying customers. The break came when a mid-sized aerospace components manufacturer, frustrated with the cost and complexity of the legacy software, signed an annual contract for $100,000. It was validation. Vance introduced us to another round of investors. We raised $2 million. The company grew. We moved to a proper office. I hired more people. I didn't change my lifestyle. I still lived frugally, plowing every cent back into the company. The ghost of poverty was a persistent companion, a useful one that kept me sharp. The only indulgence I allowed myself was a membership to a high-end gym. I transformed my body, just as I was transforming my life. The pale, defeated man in the mirror was replaced by someone with a sharp jawline, defined muscle, and eyes that held a calm, unnerving stillness. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about Chloe. A mutual friend mentioned she was living with Mark in a fancy high-rise, playing the part of the trophy wife. She'd quit her job. The friend said she seemed bored. The information was filed away. Data. Irrelevant to my current trajectory. Kratos found its niche. Our user-friendly platform became the go-to solution for a whole tier of companies that had been previously ignored. We were acquired by a larger tech conglomerate 18 months after our Series A funding round. The buyout was all stock, but it valued my share at just over $40 million. The day the deal was finalized, I stood on the balcony of my new, minimalist penthouse apartment, overlooking the city that had once seemed so hostile. The hum was still there, but now it sounded like potential. I felt nothing, no triumph, no joy. The goal had been achieved. The equation was solved. The cold fire that had driven me for 3 years suddenly had no fuel. I was left with a vast, quiet emptiness. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a major tech conference. It was a pinnacle moment, a symbol of my arrival. I prepared a talk on the future of material science software. As I was being led backstage by an event coordinator, I saw her, Chloe. She was standing near a refreshments table, looking thinner, older. Her autumn leaf hair was styled in an expensive but severe cut. She was wearing a designer dress, but it hung on her a little. Her eyes, which had once been so vibrant, were darting around the room, searching for something or someone. She saw me, and her whole body went rigid. Our eyes met across the crowded green room. The noise of the event faded into a dull roar. I felt a distant ping of something. Not anger, not nostalgia, curiosity. She walked towards me, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. The people around us seemed to sense the tension and subtly gave us space. "Leo," she said, her voice a little unsteady, I saw you were speaking. I had to, my God, you look different." "Chloe," I said, my tone neutral, the same tone I used in board meetings. A nervous laugh escaped her. "This is incredible, Kratos. Everyone's talking about it. I had no idea. Didn't you?" I asked, simply. The color drained from her face. She looked down at her champagne flute. "Look, Leo, about what happened in Vegas." "There's no need," I interrupted. "It was a long time ago. But I need to explain," she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "I was so young, so stupid. I was scared of being poor, of that life. It was suffocating me. It was a terrible mistake. Mark and it was a disaster. The annulment was messy. He was not the man I thought he was." I listened, saying nothing. I was observing a fascinating social experiment. He was controlling. He thought buying me things was a substitute for everything you were, she continued, her words tumbling out. "You were always so strong, Leo. So smart. I just couldn't see it then. I was blind." I took a sip of water. Perception is a funny thing. It's often limited by the observer's own frame of reference. She blinked, confused by the clinical response. "I heard you're worth millions now." "That's what the markets indicate," I said. A tear traced a path through her makeup. "I'm so proud of you, Leo. I always knew you had it in you." The irony was so thick it was almost palpable. The ghost in my machine stirred. "You're pathetic, by the way." "Thank you," I said. "But the credit belongs to my team. Anya and Ben. They were instrumental." She reached out a hand as if to touch my arm, but I took a slight step back. The gesture was subtle, but definitive. Her hand fell to her side. "Is there," she swallowed, "is there any chance? For us? Now that things are different? I've changed. I've grown up." I looked at her, truly looked at her. I saw the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me, and now the woman who saw me not as Leo, but as a success story, a trophy to be reacquired. She was still solving the same problem, how to secure a comfortable life. Her variables had just changed. "Things are different, Chloe," I said, my voice soft but final. "But I am not different. I am exactly who I always was. You were just never looking at the right metrics." The confusion on her face deepened into something like horror. She didn't understand. She had expected anger or perhaps a triumphant gloat. She had expected an emotional scene. She was prepared for a battle of feelings. She wasn't prepared for nothing, for a void. "Goodbye, Chloe," I said. I turned and walked towards the stage, where a young woman with a headset was waving me over. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of expectant faces, the bright lights making it hard to see the audience, I felt the emptiness again. The goal was achieved. The revenge, though I had never consciously sought it, was complete. It was a perfect, sterile victory. I began my speech. I talked about algorithms, about user experience, about the future of innovation. I was articulate. I was impressive. I was a success. But as the words left my mouth, I felt a strange disconnect. The driven, focused man of the last 3 years had vanished the moment Chloe walked away. He had served his purpose. Now I was just a man in an expensive suit, standing in a spotlight, with absolutely no idea what to do next. The applause was thunderous. I smiled, a practiced, professional smile. I waved, and as I walked off the stage, the emptiness echoed around me, louder than any applause. I had proven her wrong. I had proven everyone wrong. But the person I had been trying to prove something to was gone, and the man left in his place was standing at the summit of a mountain he had climbed only out of spite, looking out at a view that held no meaning. The story wasn't about getting rich to show her. It was about what happens after the showing is done. The victory was hollow because it was built on a foundation of negation. I hadn't built Kratos for the love of the problem, or for the joy of creation. I had built it to erase a word. Pathetic. And now that the word was erased, the canvas was blank. The real work, I realized as I stepped off the stage into the quiet wings, was about to begin. The work of finding a reason to build something that wasn't just a monument to a past hurt. The work of finding a problem worth solving for the sake of the solution itself. The story of my revenge was over. The story of my life, for the first time, was just beginning.